talk about the cards in there and some cards that I might not have in this version that I have open here. So, okay. So I've been playing Azorius Aggro lately on the ranked ladder, the best of 3 one. I guess that's the traditional ranked ladder. And this deck, at least in Arena, isn't as popular as Sultai Midrange, Mono Blue Tempo, Red Deck Wins, Esper Control, or the Gates deck. But I've been having a lot of success with it. I had previously stalled out on the ladder playing Sultai Midrange, and I started climbing again as soon as I switched to this deck. So the version of the deck I've been playing is the one that Abe Corrigan took to first place in the Dallas Star City Games Standard Classic. And it's really just a white weenie build, which is one of my favorite decks. And it has the white-blue rare duals, replacing 8 of the planes to enable bringing in Negate from the sideboard. There are other blue cards that can do decent work in this deck as well, and I will talk about those when I get to them. So anyway, let's look at the cards. The first category of cards I'm going to look at are the weenies, the small creatures in this deck that kind of make up the core of the deck. The whole strategy of the deck is built around these, and you want to play a lot of them, and you want to protect them, pump them up, and turn them sideways as much as you possibly can. So first I'm going to look at Dauntless Bodyguard. It's a 2/1 for a single white mana, which means you can immediately play it to start beating down. It's enter the battlefield and sacrifice combined effect. Makes it relevant even in the late game, as it allows you to protect creatures that are difficult to replace, such as Benalish Marshal. You shouldn't be afraid to play this on turn 1, or even just use it to protect other efficient creatures, such as Skymarcher Aspirant or Snubhorn Sentry, to help keep things on your side of the field in case of a board wipe. Keep in mind that its ability won't allow it to save creatures from exile effects or effects that reduce those creatures' toughness to 0, so don't activate it in response to those. You can activate it in response to a card like Moment of Craving targeting the Dauntless Bodyguard itself, as it'll make it fizzle and keep your opponent from getting the life gain. Okay, next card I'm going to look at is Snubhorn Sentry. This kind of, on the face of it, looks like an early blocker for a slow deck, but it's kind of deceptively aggressive. This deck tends to ascend fairly quickly, and getting a 3/3 for a single mana later in the game can be really nice. It does block well early, and gives you some defense against other weenie and aggro decks. And if you're pumping it with Benalish Marshal or Venerated Loxodon on turn 3, it can even contribute to attacks. One thing I've also found is that it's pretty useful for flipping a Legion's landing as early as turn 3, as your opponent will often not have anything with 3 power on the battlefield at that time, so even though it's not doing damage, it counts as an attacker, and it's not likely to get killed. Okay, Adanto Vanguard. Adanto Vanguard attacks as a 3/1 for 2 mana, which by itself puts it on par with cards like Oresco Swiftclaw, which is a 3/1 for 2. Those cards aren't traditionally great in constructed, but Adanto Vanguard has a good protection ability, meaning that you can save it from board wipes and even from burn, although be careful not to spend too much life doing that. And that pushes it far enough over the bar that it's a go-to aggressive beater of choice in white-based weenie and aggro decks. One thing to keep in mind, similarly to Dauntless Bodyguard, its ability won't save it from effects that exile it or reduce its toughness to 0, so don't activate its ability in response to those kind of effects. Skymarcher Aspirant. This is another efficiently costed creature. It's a 2/1 for a single mana, and it stays relevant in the late game. It's basically a perfect addition to this deck. It beats down early and then pushes over the top to finish out the game. Hunted Witness. Hunted Witness is it's good for filling out the low end of the curve. I mean, in this deck right now, we just really wanted a couple more single mana creatures. It also gives you if you need a chump blocker, it works really well for that because you can block 2 things. It also can trade for 2 1 toughness attackers. I've had this be very useful against like red deck win because of that, and it kind of lives through a board wipe since it generates a token, and the life link on the token can be relevant to helping you live long enough to win the game in some matchups. Okay, let's look at History of Benalia. History of Benalia was considered one of the best cards in Dominaria, and possibly the best card, at least by some people. It's probably, I would consider it the most important enabler to this kind of deck in current standard. You get 2 Vigilant 2/2 creatures for 3 mana, and that is an amazing deal, even when it's spread out over 2 turns like this. And its pump effect on the 3rd turn will often decisively end the game in your favor. It's very hard for an opponent to come back from that if you get, if you get through 10 damage, or kill their big creature or whatever, trade for a big creature. Also, don't forget that Dauntless Bodyguard and Benalish Marshal are also both knights, and they will get pumped by the 3rd act ability from this card. And I'm going to look at a card here real quick that I don't actually have in this deck, this version. Tithe Taker. So, Tithe Taker, it's a new card from Ravnica Allegiance, and you can definitely play it in White Weenie. It's a 2/1 for 2, which puts it those stats don't fit perfectly into the curve of this deck, but its ability is relevant, especially against blue and red decks that want to do things on your turn. And like Hunted Witness, when it dies, you get a spirit token. This one has flying instead of lifelink, which in some cases can even be more relevant. I would not put I would consider including this in the deck, but I would not put very many in there because its stats to cost is not exactly what you want on this deck. I would consider maybe replacing an Adanto Vanguard with this. Okay. The next category I'm going to look at is Pump. Benalish Marshal. This kind of leads the charge for this deck. It often can add 3 power to a turn 3 attack, letting you swing in for 6 or even like 9 damage. And if a lot of that damage goes through, that really puts your opponent on the back foot. Since it also pumps toughness, it can make blocking hard to do effectively the turn it comes out. Especially if you take your opponent by surprise. And it has the added bonus of being a knight, meaning it gets pumped by History of Benalia. The other big pump card here is Venerated Loxodon. Plays out really well. Often it comes in for a very low cost, sometimes even for free, and provides a permanent power and toughness boost to any creatures used to help cast it. As well as in addition to that, its stats are 4 power and 4 toughness, which is nothing to sneeze at. Some kind of tricks, I'm going to call them tricks, that you can do with this is play out any 1 mana creatures you have in your hand before casting this, as you can just basically make those creatures free, respend their mana cost to help play Venerated Loxodon. This also works really well with the Vigilant Knights that History of Benalia gives you, because they can attack, and then after attacks you can use them to convoke this out. That also works with Unbreakable Formation if you play it in your first main phase before attacks, as all of your creatures will be vigilant. So you can attack with all of them, they'll be indestructible, and then, tap them after attacks to cast Venerated Loxodon and get them all pumped up. In some matchups, you really can't take a turn off to play this, and so you have to be ready to sideboard it out, or in some cases just pay 5 for the 4/4. Okay, the next category I'm going to look at is removal. Let's find this here. Okay, Conclave Tribunal. You can pretty reliably cast this for 2 mana or less, which makes it great in this deck or any kind of white-based aggro deck. And you can do similar tricks when to cast it as you can with Venerated Loxodon. So you can play it after playing single mana creatures, basically making them free, or after vigilant attacks. This is really good for dealing with things like Rekindling Phoenix or other creatures that don't like to stay dead. Here, I want to talk about another card I don't have in this deck here. Deputy of Detention. Alright, this is another new card that came in with Ravnica Allegiance. It has a built-in 2 for 1, or maybe more for 1. It has a 1/3 for 3 mana that snags one of your opponent's permanents. It is a very efficiently costed card. You can hit planeswalkers with it, you can hit enchantments, you can hit artifacts. The fact that it hits things like any kind of permanent really puts it over the top as a powerful card. And it is especially good against decks playing tokens. It will exile all the tokens with the same name, and your opponent won't, you don't run the risk of your opponent getting it back by dealing with Deputy of Detention. It doesn't really feed very well into the aggressive strategy of this deck compared to like the other weenies that I listed above, so you can't just not unthinkingly add a ton of these to the deck. I would consider kind of playing this in the same slot as Conclave Tribunal. Maybe put 2 of each of those in the main deck, and maybe add one to the sideboard that you can bring in when you need to. Okay, now I'm going to look at utility spells. Unbreakable Formation. Unbreakable Formation, it gives you another source of mass pump for your weenies and also can protect them from sweepers. This is also a new card that was added with Ravnica Allegiance. So kind of plan A for this card in this deck is basically to use it to enable really big alpha strikes. So you want to play it pre-combat to get a bunch of +1/+1 counters and then just attack with your vigilant, indestructible pumped creatures. You don't have to worry about how they're going to block. You don't have to worry about them attacking back and you not being able to block. It's also really good against control decks that are playing Wrath Effect, and in those kind of matches, it's probably worth keeping one in your hand. Oh, I accidentally took it out. It's worth keeping one in your hand in cases, let's see here. So, you're going to want to play it out on a turn where it's likely to get you an immediate win. But on turns when it's not likely to get you an immediate win, you probably want to save it in your hand so that you can cast it in response to a board wipe. Okay. Also under the utility category, I have Legion's Landing. So Legion's Landing is really easy to flip in this deck, which means it almost always gives you 1/1 creature with a lifelink as well as a token generating land. It counts as a ramp since you can play it in addition to a land drop, and it only costs 1 white. And basically any white base aggro deck with a low curve is going to want this card. Lands real quick. So as I mentioned before, really like the straight up white weenie deck is going to just play like 20 planes. For this deck, that's going to bring in blue cards from the sideboard and maybe even place them in the main deck. You just replace 8 of those planes with the rare duels. the white-blue rare duels. Alright, so, speaking of sideboard, let's flip to the sideboard. So, Baffling End. Baffling End is good to bring in against decks like aggro decks with a lower curve, or decks with cheap problem creatures that you need to take out quickly. Basically, I bring this in against Wild Growth Walker, Runaway Steamkin, Goblin Chain Whirler. It also takes out Gatebreaker Ram and Hydroid Krasis, so I would keep it in mind playing against Sultai Midrange or the Gates deck. Our main blue splash, the reason for playing blue, is Negate in the sideboard. Negate is a real workhorse. It can give you an additional protection against board wipes. It can help make sure your spells resolve when your opponent tries to counter them. It can keep planeswalkers off the battlefield. I basically always bring these in against control decks, and it's also pretty good to bring in against the Gates deck to help keep Guild Summit off the field and keep their Gates ablaze from resolving and killing all your guys. Ajani, Adversary of Tyrants. This card does two main things that you want in this deck. It pumps your creatures, which is great. It adds 2 power and 2 toughness to your side of the battlefield. And also it can bring back a creature, which gives you some added resilience against removal. The flexibility of this card, allowing you to put additional pressure against your opponent, or punish control decks for being too slow, or for undo the work they put into killing your creatures. Makes this pretty great. He can also help in matchups that result in board stalls. I guess, for example, a Sultai midrange opponent, you might deal with their most problematic creatures, like their Wild Growth Walkers, but a lot of times you'll end up leaving behind a bunch of creatures that are hard to attack through, that they could just block with indefinitely, like all the little Explore dudes. But Ajani can help break that kind of board stall. And the fourth one I have in this version of the deck is Tocatli Honor Guard. This works especially well against Sultai midrange, as it shuts down the whole Explorer package. But it can also be useful against other aggro decks, as it's a early 1/3 blocker. It keeps Goblin Chain Whirler and Ravenous Chupacabra from triggering. The one thing to note is that Hydroid Krasis' trigger is an on-cast trigger, not an enters the battlefield trigger. So this card will not stop your opponent from drawing cards or getting life from Hydroid Krasis. If you are playing other blue cards main deck, or have more blue cards in the sideboard, to the extent that after sideboarding you're likely to have more than like 4 blue cards in the deck, you might also consider putting an island in the sideboard that you can swap in to help fix your mana a little more. Besides that, other sideboard cards that I would consider for this deck: Spell Pierce. Basically, this can stop your opponent casting Planeswalkers and other expensive spells, and the only requirement is keeping 1 blue mana open. So if you're seeing a lot of those kind of spells causing you issues in your matchups, you might consider Spell Pierce as a replacement for some of the negates, or just in addition to them. If you have opponents casting things out early, like casting things early that you want to Spell Pierce, like Search for Azcanta and stuff, this might be another reason to be able to pull in another island from the sideboard to help make sure you can have blue mana early. Okay, let's see here, another counter spell that you might want to have in the sideboard. Sorry, I need my on-screen keyboard. I'm on a tablet here. Disdainful Stroke. This also stops most of the planeswalkers and expensive spells. It's more unconditional than Spell Pierce, which can make it a more attractive option, or even maybe just you want to have one of these and a couple of the other or whatever. So I would also consider this for the sideboard. I wouldn't probably include more than one or two of them there, or maybe include one of these and two Spell Pierces, or one of these and a Spell Pierce, something like that. And then gonna just mention another card that I already had mentioned once earlier. Deputy of Detention. In addition to running a couple of copies of this in the main deck, you might also consider having an additional copy in the sideboard where you can bring in against the kind of matchups where it really shines, like ones with problematic non-creature non-creature permanents that you want to deal with, or with tokens. Alright, and that's about it, and I will cut this off now and add on some gameplay so you can see how the deck plays out, at least this version of the deck, and then I will also have an article linked to this video. In the article, I'm going to also include another version of the deck that includes some of the cards I mentioned that aren't in this version of the deck. Alright, see you all later. Thanks. The Azorius creature that has an O-ring effect that exiles all permanents with this given name that an opponent controls until as long as they're on the battlefield. I don't actually play that card in this version of the deck. Here, I will keep this. But it is a pretty popular include. So mostly it's just play out the small creatures, try to get them pumped, attack, attack, attack. Snubhorn Sentry is pretty good as it becomes a 3/3 pretty quickly, or larger with Venerated Loxodon and or Benalish Marshal and or Unbreakable Formation pumping it. Okay, it looks like I'm playing against Grixis control here. Glacial Fortress, don't really have anything to attack with yet. I'll play the Adanto Vanguard. Pass turn. Oh, didn't mean to do that. No attacks. End turn. So my next turn, depending on what I draw, I'm probably just playing Benalish Marshal and attacking for 5. Looks like they have some counter magic up, so maybe that's not what I want to do. I kind of want to get that out as quickly as I can. You know what, I'm just attacking with the Vanguard and playing out some 1-drops. The problem is that they also might just have the -2/-2 to all my creatures. I'm gonna play both these out. Hunted Witness replaces itself if it gets blown up. Okay, it's a counter good. Well, they might have both, so I shouldn't say good too quickly. Okay. Well, I think I made the right call not playing the Benalish Marshal yet, but we'll see. Okay, I'm gonna see if I can flip a Legion's Landing. That's worthwhile. I'm gonna counter it. Okay, so they counter that, so I'm going to, instead of attacking this turn, I'm going to Venerated Loxodon, convoking it with all these guys to put counters on him. Well, now I have 2 creatures out of the way of a -2/-2 board wipe. And one that replaces itself when it happens. But a Ritual of Soot. Okay. Go to sideboard. I'm gonna bring in my Negates. I'm gonna take out a Venerated Loxodon. I still want Conclave Tribunals in there. So I'm gonna take out a History of Benalia and both of the Hunted Witnesses. What I'm worried about is Planeswalkers. That's why I left the Convoke O-Ring in there. And also, I have a feeling that they might play out a, I might need to exile a Nicol Bolas or something like that, or even a Niv Mizzet. Or I have no idea if that was playing Drakes and they just never got one out. So I'll keep this. Hello. So Negates are to counteract their counter magic. A lot of Dauntless Bodyguards. They can kind of protect each other from board wipes, I guess. To some extent. Okay, they're gonna take my History of Benalia, I'm almost sure. Yeah, I was gonna say they might take Venerated Loxodon, but I think they're gonna take History of Benalia. So they just want to keep me from pumping stuff. Okay, so that Dauntless Bodyguard protects that one. And sure, that one protects that one. I don't know why it matters. I'll have them both protect that same tapped one. So now they've got a counter, they're holding counter spell. Probably. So I'm going to go ahead and just attack. And I'm going to pass turn. They'll probably just cast a card draw spell or like a Moment of Craving or something. Yeah. I'm going to need a little more land and some negates to push things past the counter spells. Okay, so attack for 4. Play a Hallowed Fountain tapped. And pass turn. Okay, my turn. Alright, now I have 2 Venerated Loxodons. I don't really want to take a turn off, so what I'm going to do is attack, and then I'm going to cast the Venerated Loxodon they can see. Not convoking anything. Let him counter that. This is kind of a tricky one. Alright, play a plains. Go ahead and attack. And, I can't. Let's see, if I cast a History of Benalia. No, I'm just going to end turn for now. They're going to have to board wipe. And it's going to have to be something that gives them all minus stats. I mean, Moment of Craving is going to save them for a turn. Oh, nope. Good game. Alright. That's it for now. I will see you guys later. Versions of the deck play. I am going to be putting up an article, a deck tech article, going over other options. I will need to mulligan this as there's no lands. I'm going to keep this and hope that I can scry a land to the top. Perfect. Hello. Skymarcher Aspirant. Skymarcher Aspirant is one of my favorite turn 1 plays for this deck. I really like to follow it up with another 1-drop and a Dauntless Bodyguard. Don't have that luxury this time, but I'm going to play out my other 1-drops. My hope with getting 3 creatures on the board right away is to be able to play a Legion's Landing and flip it on the next turn. Might not happen. Oh, but it did. Perfect. So now I can attack with these, flip the Legion's Landing, and play Adanto Vanguard. And hope that I'm not overextending myself into a board wipe or something. At least 2 of my creatures kind of lived through a board wipe. Hunted Witness turns into a lifelink token, and Adanto Vanguard can protect itself at the cost of 4 life. Let's see here, do I want Unbreakable Formation yet? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That would be 11 damage. Probably not what I need quite yet. So what I'm going to do is play another Legion's Landing. I think that might ascend Snubhorn Sentry. And then my hope is that if they have something tricky, it'll happen after Legion's Landing flips and I'll be able to... Oh, I should have been able to add white mana in response. Oh, that stinks. Doesn't matter. End turn. Grill Spiral. Okay, so are they going to start fogging? Is this a Turbo Fog deck? Let's see. So now I just save Unbreakable Formation to... Okay. Good game. Go to sideboards. I don't actually know. I didn't see enough of the deck to know what to sideboard in. You know, I'm going to put in... I feel like this is a fog deck and I need to put in a negate. I'm going to... You know what? I'm just going to go full aggro. I'm going to put in negates. And I'm going to take out some of my higher cost things. And see how that works. So I want to be able to negate a fog if I need to. I want to be able to negate a, you know, a Teferi. Well, that didn't look like they had a Teferi. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was a Gates deck. That might have been actually a Gates deck. We'll see. I'm going to mulligan this because I really want 2 lands. Okay, I'm going to keep this and see if I can scry land to the bottom if I need to. Oh no, Venerated Loxodon. That's okay, I can keep that on top. Got a negate there. Play my Hunted Witness. So it was red, black, and green. Which kind of seems like a gate deck, except these aren't guild gates. So here, let's attack. And then I'm going to play Legion's Landing because I'm going to be able to Venerated Loxodon. Pump these both on my next turn. So they probably have a growth spiral. We'll see. Oh good, I can also Skymarcher Aspirant and then Venerated Loxodon all 3 of these. Although they might have a creature counter, which would be unfortunate. I'm gonna go for it. I'm hoping that's a growth spiral. Okay. And then if they're fogging on the next turn, I can hopefully negate it to get the damage through. What I'm worried about is, oh, Wilderness Reclamation, okay. Yeah, this is definitely Turbo Fog. Okay. Now the question is, do I counter a fog here? Okay, if they have a fog, they're holding on to it. Chemister's Insight. Do I let them have it? Yeah. What I need to negate is basically only Board Wipe, Fog, or Nexus of Fate. Unfortunately, they can cast a Nexus of Fate and leave mana open for a fog. So what I'm hoping is that they waste all their excess mana looking for a Nexus that I'm going to be able to negate. So they need... Oh, there's a Wilderness Reclamation. I'm going to let them have it. So they're going to untap and then hopefully cast some more card draw spells. Okay, now these are going to all untap. And is it a Nexus now? Yeah. So I'll negate the Nexus. They might have a counter from my negate, we'll see. I hope not. They might also have another fog here. Yeah. Well, that stinks. Letting them have the 2 Wilderness Reclamations might have been an error. Because they wouldn't have been able to even cast Nexus of Fate on the last turn. Although they still would have fogged me and then cast the next Nexus. It's hard for me to tell. Okay, there's a Hydroid Crisis. Or... Okay, so if they got a Nexus of Fate in their hand now, I think I'm screwed. So they don't have one yet. If they don't have an... Oh, they do. They got their Nexus. Okay. So they're gonna get an attack out, and let's see what else. Let's see what they got going on here now. Lots of card draw still. If they can just, if they whiff, I think I got it, but... Okay, they have a growth spiral. It's all about just drawing cards for them. Okay, they're not attacking. Okay, now do they have a Nexus of Fate yet? Not yet. So if they don't find one here, I might be okay. Did they find a Nexus of Fate yet? Of course, they probably have a Fog, even if they don't have a Nexus. So they're gonna do one more look for a Nexus. Nope, they have a Fog though. Oh, shoot. I should have made a token. Okay, now they have all the time in the world to find another Nexus of Fate. Very annoying. And they have so much card draw. I mean, they still have 33 cards in the deck, so they can still whiff. I just have a feeling it's not going to happen. Oh, there's a new visit. That's frustrating. Wow, that's a good card to have in this deck. Okay. So, they're gonna start pinging stuff. Alright. Well, I'm gonna protect all my guys right now. Although that's also drawing them another card. Grow from the ashes. So they have hit me. Okay. Yep, there's another Nexus. And they just keep hitting me. Yeah, I really should have countered that Wilderness Reclamation. I actually need to go... I think I need to take out another Venerated Loxodon to put back in a Conclave Tribunal, so I can try to get rid of Wilderness Reclamation if and when it comes. How long do I let him keep messing around? Oh, okay. Well, I guess I block Niv. Oh, nice, another Nexus. Okay, time to concede. Yeah. Venerated Loxodon just a little too slow. I will put one Conclave Tribunal in. This is kind of just a race. I will play first. I will keep this. Hello. They're looking for the perfect hand. Okay. Dauntless Bodyguard. Okay, I will attack, and then it's Adanto Vanguard. Let's curve out as much as I can. Okay, Hallowed Fountain. I'm gonna play this untapped and see if I can get a History of Benalia in. I kind of just need to force them to spend all their mana on fogs until they can't fog anymore. And I also have to remember not to overextend myself. Okay, let's attack. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Okay, so I have enough to kill them. So what I'm going to do is Dauntless Bodyguard to protect one of these knights. And then I'm going to end turn. Because I'm afraid they're going to do a burn board wipe, and I need to be able to save a couple creatures if they do. Well, it's time for them to start fogging, I think. Yep. So I activate this to save it. Then I activate this to save the thing I brought it in to save. And we're done. Good game. Okay, I will see you guys later. Oof, that was a nail biter for me a little bit.